Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tango Banter. I'm Yelizaveta, and today we're doing something a little bit different. A few weeks ago, I interviewed Elena, the Zouk dancer who went to a milonga in New York City and didn't have a positive experience. And since then, there's been a lot of discussion online in communities across the United States and maybe in other parts of the world about tango needing to be more friendly or maybe not. So the whole question of whether tango as a social scene is has problems with being too standoffish and too intimidating for beginners. So it's become a hot topic of debate. And recently I hosted a live banter on this topic in my Facebook group. And I've decided to share this conversation as part of my podcast because I know for many of my listeners, you're not part of Facebook and you can't attend live, but I do think it's a relevant discussion and wanted to make sure that as many people as possible could hear some of the debate and form your own opinions. I would love for you to share your response, and if you have any ideas to add to the discussion, you can pop your comments below. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can message me on social media at IMSO I'm so Tango. You can also email me, lots of ways to connect with me. I would love to hear from you. If you've been a fan of the show, if you love this podcast, I would love for you to write us a review on Apple Podcasts, especially because that's where it counts the most. These reviews could also have some feedback. If you want something different, if you would like to submit requests for particular topics, if there's something that I could improve on, it can be part of your review. You can also send me your feedback personally. I'm really looking to improve this podcast and continue to grow it, so would love your support and your help in developing it. All right, without further ado, here is my live banter on the topic of whether the tango scene should be, can be, needs to be more friendly to outsiders and beginners. Zouk dancer went to a milonga. She wrote an article about this. And since then, there's been a lot of chatter about the friendliness of tango, the level of friendliness. Is tango less friendly than other dances? And I interviewed Elena a couple of weeks ago. I posted the episode and there's been a lot of commentary, and it's interesting because as we keep talking about it, there's several things that are emerging as the different camps that people are landing in on this topic. One is that she shouldn't even feel entitled to dance at all at her first milonga, and she should have known better. And tango has a lot of etiquette that people need to know ahead of time. The other camp of people quite closely resonated with her experience. And I've been getting stories from different people about their experience going to their first tango events and how difficult it was for them to penetrate the scene. And they said it was very similar to her experience. I even got to talk to some people about this at the Austin Tango Festival I was just at last weekend. Lots of conversations about that. People are like super on board. Like, yeah, this really does happen. It's quite bad. It's worse than other dances. And then the third camp, I think that's kind of spearheading the movement of this discussion, is the friend. A lot of people are ragging on the friend and saying like he did her a disservice for bringing her to milonga, to even telling her that she should break the code and things like that. So that's been kind of where the conversation's at. And most recently here locally, Derek Tang and Robert Lay, two of the dancers in the community, they reviewed a part of my episode, my interview with Elena, and they posted their commentary of the interview. And they basically also, most of their conversation revolved around the friend and how badly the friend reflected on Tango in certain ways for giving her such bad advice. So I wanted to, I guess, bring other elements of the conversation that maybe have been sort of overlooked and see where this conversation can actually take us productively, because many debates on Tango online end up sort of being this back and forth arguments about like whether something is true or not. But I feel like this is a rare opportunity for us collectively to actually reflect on Tango and do something about it individually. Like I do feel like there's some things that can be done to improve both our culture, our Tango culture, and the experience of people coming in, as well as educate other dancers, other people who might not be familiar with Tango with what Tango is about. Like I feel that's the end goal I want of this discussion. So I'm curious how many people agree with this sentiment that it's really about the friend, or whether you think it's more that it really is the culture of Tango. So as I'm talking, if you want to pop in your thoughts into the comments, if you want to send me individual messages, if you're not comfortable sharing, a lot of you have said to me that you're joining these calls, but you're too shy to share publicly. So, send it to me as a message on Facebook Messenger. I'm totally fine receiving those, and you can share your thoughts that way. And you don't have to do it as I'm talking. You can do it later, but just feel free to share, because I'm sure people who resonate with her story might not be as readily open about it to everyone, because there's a lot of pushback, right? There's a lot of a lot of people who don't want to be seen as bad. As dancers, we're like, we're not bad. Tango's not bad. We're not evil. We're just quirky. She should just understand that Tango dancers are quirky. And so, yeah, I kind of want to start out with that. Now, the friend. So let's just talk about this idea that the friend is to blame. And when I read the article originally, that was my reading of it as well. It's like, oh my gosh, this poor girl, it's not her. It's like the friend gave her bad advice. So that's true. That's true. However, just because the friend gave her this bad advice, it still holds that she had this overall negative experience. There were multiple opportunities for her to turn things around. Like there could have been other things that happened that turned her experience around. And I think it's true to say, like, yeah, as a beginner, you shouldn't go to Tango, but there are so many people who started Tango that way. You can say that, like, that's true. It's better not to go to Milonga having only had like one lesson or, a couple of lessons. And granted, she's done Tango like she had tried Tango sometime before at a different setting. She had a class when she was in college, and she also had a negative experience. And she's been on the social dance scene for a long time. And the interview that I had with her, what I really wanted to show was that, there are other social dances out there dealing with very similar issues. And she's been around for a very long time, exposed to lots of different dynamics. She's been an organizer and a teacher, and these kinds of issues are not new to her. So when she is writing about her experience again in Tango after already trying it a while back, and now she's here, and sure, she had some bad advice from a friend, and then she still continued to have such a negative experience that she writes an article. It's like, yeah, let's not ignore that there is something going on here. And I feel the focus on the friend is it's kind of giving us a scapegoat in a way. It's like, oh, let's just blame it on the friend. Okay, let's just blame that the friend is the one who really did her disservice. And if it wasn't for him, she would have had a wonderful time. She would have come to tango in a completely different way. But that's not true. Like, we don't know that. And I started tango without having gone to a class. Started dancing tango at a milonga. Like, I was brought to a milonga before I did any classes. And I know lots of people who did that as well. And they did great. They did fine. They had a wonderful time. I still see it as well. Like, this guy who was, did her a disservice. I think that it was kind of bad advice. But I also know people who've done that with other new dancers. They just brought him in and they're like, hey, yeah, here's this person, that person. You can't dance, don't worry about it. Just go for it. And they had a great time. I've talked to many dancers who had that experience. So that's one point I want to make. The other is that even though this guy gave her bad advice that we all collectively agree, he's still part of tango. Like, he's not a stranger also, or like somebody who dabbles in tango and just comes in and gives her bad advice because he doesn't know any better. He's been around and he knows. And what he's saying is not necessarily untrue. It is true that some communities are more lax with the capaceo than others. It is true that the etiquette is different, that it's changed, and the culture is different in different communities. So it's not like he actually is wrong. He's not thinking perhaps of the consequences of his advice, and he's not perhaps aware of what it's like for a woman versus a man coming in, or other things that he's not considering. But it's not necessarily untrue what he said to her. And he does represent part of tango. Like, he is a representation of tango as it exists today. There are people in tango who have those attitudes, and it's just, that's the multi-dimensionality of tango. So to say that, oh, it's just this odd person, the friend who didn't know any better and gave her bad advice, and that's really the problem. It's like, no, that's part of the problem, sure. But considering that she's interacted with multiple people in the community throughout the night, that at no point nobody else stepped in and was like, hey, so you're a beginner and, well, let's talk about it. Let me just let you know if, in this milonga, actually, the capaceo is actually really important. Like, that person who didn't like that she tapped him on the shoulder, he could have been like, hey, you know what? Just so you know, that's kind of like a gesture that's not really accepted. You might upset some people. Like, there could have been someone who stepped in, and that didn't happen. So I kind of want to go beyond the friend in this discussion and just really talk about what responsibility we have as a community to outsiders, to people who are coming in, because it's a real question. And I think it's a valuable question because people like Elena, who have been on the dance scene for a long time, she's got teaching experience, organizing experience. She is very committed to community building. In my mind, I'm like, these are the kinds of people we want to come into tango. We want dancers who possibly already have a really good skill set and movement wise, and they'll pick it up really quick. We want people who are excited about community building. And I personally feel like those are the kinds of people I want more to see, to see more in tango. So how do we bridge that gap? How do we create, a bridge between us and the outside world? Because right now it's sort of like we're saying, well, we're just special and we're not for everyone. So we're just going to be here in our little corner. And some people, we actually told her that we don't need more dancers. We just need better dancers, right? So it's like, we don't care that you even want to come here. We don't need you. We just need better, right? Which is sort of like, I don't even know what kind of mindset we need to have to come from that place, but it just feels a little bit stuck up, right? Like, who do we think we are? I mean, tango is a peculiar dance. It's very interesting. It's like, has a lot of culture, but it's not the only dance with like a rich history and lots of technicality. Every social dancer will defend their dance that they're passionate about in the same way. And that's true. And to say that tango is so much harder than other dancers, that a person like Elena would not be able to walk in the line of dance in an embrace, like, really? I kind of, I have a hard time believing it. I could bet money, I really could, that if I were to dance with her today, I would be able to lead her in basic tango figures and make it work on the dance floor. It's possible to do that with beginners. You don't have to be in close embrace. You don't have to do fancy stuff. You can just walk and do, rhythmic weight changes and quick, slow, and a little bit of this. They don't know the cross. They don't know the molinete. That's okay. Like, you can just walk with music. That's a skill set that all leaders have. And we definitely can't do that with beginners. And I've seen it done. Like, I've seen examples of this many times, even recently, where there are raw beginners in the room and people dance with them and they don't do great. They're not like amazing to dance with, but it works. All right, let's see what you guys are up to here. Bill, hello. Human nature is the problem. Conversation closed. Bill said so. Blame the friend. The friend for sure picked the wrong milonga to introduce someone with 2 hours of experience, was wrong in saying the codes don't matter. Yeah, absolutely. Now, 2 hours of experience with him alone, but she's had experience. I don't know why we're overlooking this part. She's not a beginner. She's not a typical, like, off the street, never done any dances. So it's a different case in my opinion, my humble opinion. I think it's a little bit of a different case. Like, she already knows the connection. Like she knows the technique for connection. She understands the technique for following, right? So for that person, 2 hours is different than if it's like somebody who's never danced before. And she's had tango prior, right? So I think, like, yeah, it's definitely not a good thing to do. He did not have a good strategy. And I want to talk about that, actually. If you're introducing someone to tango, like, his I think downfall was the fact that he didn't introduce her to other people in the milonga, and especially other women. I think if he had come in and was like, let me introduce you to the dancers who are there all the time, the women who come every week, they're the social ones, they're the ones who gather people around, like, that would have been a good strategy. And that's kind of what I do now. When I see beginners come in, or I see people who are new, I make it a point to be like, okay, introduce them to everybody. Anybody who comes in, just like, give them some sort of a introduction to the community, because that definitely makes a difference. So I think that would have made a big difference. And the other one, of course, the capaceo, of course, it's not good to say that the capaceo doesn't matter, right? Like, definitely, I think that was an oversight on his part. And maybe it has to do with the fact that he himself does that and he gets away with it, which crosses over into a different topic, right? The capaceo, and how some people just, they have it as a strategy. Sometimes they capaceo and sometimes they ask. And that's just part of their operation at the milonga. And they just think to give that advice to everybody because it works for them. And they're not realizing that they have a special sort of permission, let's say. Isn't he experienced enough that he should know that different milongas have different customs? Not what he wants every milonga to be like. But yes, someone should have noticed and stepped in. Right? Yeah, exactly. I'm like, yes, we need to hold him accountable for sure. And that's like a question also, like how we pass on the values of the community, how we, promote certain etiquette and values. Like, this is where organizers step in, right? Like, it's the organizer is the one who sets the tone. So they have to model it. So for me, when I go to an event and I see the organizer acting a certain way and promoting certain values, modeling certain behavior, like to me, that's what the event is about. Ultimately, whether that's should be that way or not, it's another matter. Some organizers are just not very good socially, which is kind of it's tough, right? Like some organizers, they like to be behind the scenes. They don't like to be in the spotlight. So they might kind of retreat, in which case they need to have somebody who has that role, right? To like step in and be in the front. That needs to be there. So he, unfortunately, I just want to bring that back, that he's not an isolated, like, oh, we just need to blame him as this like example of something that's an anomaly. Like, he is a product of tango culture, and there's other people like him. So we need to just understand that some people give bad advice. And if you see that happening, right, it's like, sure, we can blame the friend, but what's the end results, right? Like, we have all the right in the world to sit back and say, we don't need to change. It's the friend's fault. It's nothing about us. There's nothing wrong with how I'm behaving on the dance floor. It's the friend. But the end result, what's the end result? Is that she went away upset. She wrote an article that perhaps has influenced other people's decision to try tango. And to me, that's like that's big impact right there, just from like one night of experience. So yes, we have the right to take this position of judgment towards the other person, but also those kinds of situations are probably happening all the time. And I've been getting stories from people saying like, oh yeah, that happened to me where I tried tango and I had a terrible experience, and then it took me 3 years and then I got back into it. So yeah, that's kind of my take on it. Toshi, what I don't get is that any community has its own rules and customs, and we expect new people to learn and respect. No? I mean, I hope you're saying it in the way that I'm interpreting it, is that like we have this opinion that the newcomers need to do the work and earn a place among us. Like, they need to do their homework and they need to understand all this stuff about tango, which might be true. Like that does exist in the world. Like, there are certain groups of people with extremely esoteric knowledge where you have to do your homework and prep yourself before starting. But like, who's going to do that? Like, what kind of context do people do that in? Right? It's more like if I want to master the art of yoga and I want to be considered one of the experts on yoga, I'm going to seek out specific teachers and study with them, and I will do the work of like prepping myself, right? But that's the kind of case. But what kind of people come to social dance? The people who want connection with other people, they're not seeking to like go on a pilgrimage and commit 20 years of their life to some sort of spiritual trajectory, which does happen through tango. Tango stimulates all of this change and life lessons and all that, but like, that's not what they're coming for. And then, of course, the tango community or the tango dancers, some of them might say, well, tango is not for everyone. C'est la vie. Tango is not for everyone. Sure, that's true. Tango is not for everyone. However, are you going to be okay with taking on responsibility of proclaiming who is it for and not? Like, do you want that responsibility? You want to look at someone and judging by who they are in this moment, you just want to be the one to say, well, it's not for everyone. So therefore, I don't need to connect with this person. I don't need to dance with them because it's not for everyone. And they're obviously not the type, right? Like, sure, you could do that, but like, man, that's a lot of responsibility, because we all know how profound tango is, like how much it transforms you and gives you all of this incredible connection. And it just really is a force, right? It's a force. And to say that like somebody should not be exposed to it because it's not for them, like I wouldn't want to be that person. I don't want to be the reason why somebody might say, no, I'm not going to give tango a try. I think it is our responsibility as dancers to pass tango on to as many people as possible. This is how I was describing it to Alex yesterday, is that yes, we have every right to sit in the corner and say like, oh, we're just special and you need to do all this stuff to be a part of our scene, right? You need to know the rules. You need to understand the line of dance. You need to do all this work, right? But at the same time, don't we want more dancers on the dance floor? And we have organizers who want to have their milongas full. And we want teachers with more students. And we want teachers who get paid more. And we want cheaper milongas and cheaper festivals. And we want more places to go and dance. And we want to go in and have more leaders to dance with. Like, we want both of those things. And we're not going to get those things if we choose, rightly so, we do have the right to choose to be like, well, we're just special and we're going to wait for people to come to us. And it's like when people come to us, like we can say, oh, well, if it's not for you, don't worry about it, right? But I think, for me, I think of it as more, what's the end result that I'm sort of promoting or that I want to see for myself? Like, I want to have more dancers to dance with. I want to have better dancers, but like, we need more people coming in. We need to have people not be so intimidated, right? Because most people are not going to have that strength. Like, it's like the gym, you know, you're going into a gym, and if your coach that you hire expects you to automatically bench press an obscene amount of weight and do all this stuff, like, you're going to leave feeling like you're not good enough, right? And it's like, is that going to encourage you to continue? Are you going to feel good about it to continue to go? Probably not, right? Because you were overwhelmed. Like, there was too much asked of you. And in order to, I think, make it possible for someone to gain that insight and respect into the tango culture and be interested in learning the capaceo, like, there's got to be some sort of a bridge for people. I just want to mention that Derek and Robert, I really love the fact that they continued the conversation, which I think is important. And I love other people in the community coming in and stepping in, but they only listened to a small portion of the interview. And the whole interview was about a lot more than just this instance. So we did talk a lot about how this is not isolated in tango. There are other problems in other communities that they're dealing with. And the questions are universal, not just for tango dancers. So I do encourage you to listen to the whole interview if you have a strong opinion about it, and just consider the other elements of the conversation to kind of give you a little bit more of a background into this story. Christos, it's all about the dancers and how seriously we take the dance. Many people take it too seriously and become more unfriendly to the ones who are new. We need to understand and be able and see the dance from their side too, as a simple hobby, as just a simple dance. If people don't go through this stage, they will not get to take it seriously. Yeah, that's actually a really important point. For me, when I started, I did not like tango. I wasn't into tango. I was into the guy that got me to tango. I was like hanging around him a lot. I was interested in him. And then my favorite milonga was the alt milonga in Dallas. It was on a Thursday night once a month. It was at a wine bar, and it was all alt. And it was the cheesiest, most cliche alt that you could possibly imagine. And I loved it. That was like the night I lived for. I was there every time. So I think it's true for a lot of people. They're coming in with a much more sort of social expectation of just having fun and connecting with people. They don't know. And again, I know some of you might be like, yeah, that's their expectation, and they need to realize it's not like that. in a lot of milongas like this one in New York. It's very serious. It's very serious dancers. Sure, that's also true. But I think of the two, who has more foresight? Who has more experience and understanding of the whole process? It's us. We are the ones with the expertise, not the beginner. So again, it kind of comes back to like, yeah, I totally can get away with not dancing with beginners. I have every right not to spend my energy on anything other than what I want, because this is my time. And I have that. Sometimes I go in with that attitude. It's my time. It's my dance. I don't want to be responsible for anybody else's experience. It's my escape. Sure. And at the same time, the other is true as well, that when I see a beginner and they're lost and they're just standing there in the corner and nobody's asking them to dance, like, yeah, like that's also exists. Like, that's true. That's there. And it's our choice. It's our choice every time. It's our choice. Nobody's forcing us. Nobody is telling you to change what you're doing. And I do want to emphasize that even though a lot of people can throw out a lot of solutions, those solutions are just possibilities. I think the sweet spot is when nobody is being asked to do more than what they're willing, obviously. So if there's a dancer who's very antisocial and they don't want to socialize with any new people, fine. Like, that's how they are. They're like introverted. They're awkward around people. They don't like chit-chatting. They just want to sit in the corner. That's fine. But they're not the only ones. There's lots of people in the community who are very different. And there's a lot of dancers who are very social and they want to be up front. They love connecting with people. And again, I'm going to bring up Austin Tango Festival, which in my book, at this point, is sort of the friendliest festival I've been to in a long time. And not because the people necessarily were very different, but because there were different things in place. Like, there were different practical things in place that made it feel more friendly. One of them was this idea of dance ambassadors, which I think is a great idea, because I would never be a dance ambassador myself, but there are a lot of people who really loved that role. And so they had a ribbon and they were out there on the dance floor during certain times, and anybody could come up to them and dance with them without following the capoeira rule. And I thought that was such a great idea. And the reason why I think it's such a great idea, not because I saw it in action only, but because I heard people talking about it. I heard people who were beginners, who were new to the community, talk about how much they appreciated having these people. And then the ambassadors themselves were like so happy. They were like serving. You could tell that they were like getting off on the fact that they got to be useful, like that they had a role to play. So that's like a practical thing to do to bridge that gap. That doesn't require anybody to do anything that they don't want to. And I think the pushback mostly has to do with that. I think there's this anxiety that we have that we're going to be told that we need to do something that's beyond what we want, or that we're expected to act more generously than we're capable of, or be pushed into some sort of behavior that we don't want. But it's like, that's not the solution either. It's not going to work. Like, it doesn't work to blame the leaders, for example, right? Like, there's been a lot of hate towards the leader. Leaders only like young people, young women. And so leaders need to do this and they need to do that. And I can tell that for some leaders, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that they need to do something else. And I think there are other ways to bridge that gap without having to put all of the responsibility on one particular group, whether it's the organizers or the leaders or the young dancers versus the old dancers. Yvonne, people who say that are just deluded, without fresh blood, tango will die a slow, torturous death. Yeah, exactly. And she makes a really interesting point. She uses this phrase, which I appreciated, and she was talking about her own community, which Zouk, I did not know this, but Zouk is a relatively new dance form that is not very well respected among the social dances because it's so new, and it's a derivative of other forms of dance. And she said, we don't have the luxury of turning away beginners or dancers. Like, our community is so small and the dance is sort of hanging on for survival that we really need to work hard to keep the community alive and keep the thing going. So tango does not have that kind of problem. Tango has survived and will survive, and it's really thriving at this point, at least from what I'm expecting, or at least what I'm seeing around me. But also, when I think about the idea of the golden age of tango, like, think about what it was, the golden age of tango, 1930s, 40s. That time period, when people talk about it with this nostalgic look and they say, oh, there was so much tango. Tango was on the radio and milongas were packed and the orchestras had to play 3 gigs in one night at 3 different milongas. And there was all this competition and there was all this music being created. And don't we want another golden age of tango? Don't we want to have that energy pulsing and creativity? And who's to say that awkward, beginner with the wrong everything, doesn't dance well, the wrong body type, but they become some incredible musician or composer or whatever? Like, we don't know. And to me, it's like, I've been surprised. I've had people come to tango as beginners and they would have a lesson with me and I'd be like, yeah, this person's not going to make it. And then I see them years later and they're doing amazing. And I'm like, wow, I'm the worst predictor of that sometimes. So you never know. And that's why, collectively speaking, if we want that future for tango, we want the golden age of tango. We want milongas that are selling out. We want tango on the radio. We want tango to be respected and to have the funding to do big events and whatever. Like, if we want that growth, then we do need to think in those terms. And every person, according to their personality and their sociability, can play a role, because tango is an ecosystem, right? It requires certain parts. It doesn't work if it's just the organizers doing all the work. And it doesn't work if the organizers don't do any work and they just rely on the energy of the room to just sort of work itself out. And, it's got to be like different pieces working together. That's what I've seen create the best results, is when you have certain people in place to do certain things and you have like a good team together, right? As I mentioned before, the community there in LA is very friendly. You guys have been very welcoming to me over the years, but I suspect if I had gone to that milonga in New York, I might have had a similar experience. Stuart, I love that you posted this, because I have a message from somebody 2 days ago who complained about the tango scene in LA. And actually, 2 people. I talked to 2 people. One was from San Diego, and they said that they had a very similar experience to Elena at first. And when I asked them, like, what was it? What was it? What happened? And this person was like, multiple milongas in LA that they went to, and they had a terrible time, and they left tango for a couple of years and then they came back to it. And then the other conversation was from someone in San Francisco who said that there were people here recently and they complained how LA dancers are not very open, right? So, like, every scene has this, and I've heard this a lot about LA. I think LA is very friendly. I mean, I love it. I love my community. I feel very excited about being part of it. I think we have a lot of great things going on. But I also hear that sometimes people are not friendly. And I've had to have, I call them my come to Jesus moments. I had to look at myself and my own dance strategy to see where do I fit in to this context practically. Because, you can talk the talk, but what does it mean to actually walk the talk, right? And I have learned a lot from one particular person, and that is my husband. I don't know if he's listening, but I learned a lot from him because he is one of the people who he just wants to connect. He just wants to connect. He's very curious about people. He will strike up a conversation with anyone, any Uber driver, any person in the street. Like that's his personality. That's not my personality. But I had to observe the impact he was having because he a lot of times will seek out people who are sitting down, who are not getting the dances. And he does it. Sometimes he does it, sometimes he doesn't. It's not something that he is coming to from this perspective of like, oh, I need to do this thing for the community. It's just like, that's his personality. And watching him, I kind of started reflecting on my own personality. And I tend to be a little bit more like, a little bit more of a badger. And like, I'll like go in a corner sometimes. And I don't like talking to people. And I have noticed that about myself. And I accept that about myself. But at the same time, I've noticed that when I do have the will and the energy to do something different, I kind of clock that and I take the opportunity. So at big events, for example, at festivals like the Austin Festival that I was just at, it was a conscious effort on my part to dance with people that I saw were not necessarily getting the dances that they wanted or that they were getting at all, right? There was that decision on my part, not because, I thought that they were going to be amazing dances, right? But because I was like, look, this person needs to dance. And especially with someone like me who has a lot of visibility, and there's dancers like me who other people are watching, and I'm watching other dancers like that. And we're modeling for other people. So when I see a very advanced dancer, somebody who's a teacher and an organizer, when I see them dancing with people who are not virtuosic and amazing, when I see them dancing with beginners or somebody who's coming in who doesn't know any better, like I see that I clock that. That's very noticeable. And I think that about myself, right? If people see me dancing with certain people, they're watching. So I want to model that. I want to give that exposure to someone who might not get it otherwise. That's a choice that I've made for myself, and that works with who I am as a person. There's other things that people can do that don't require dancing. Like if you're the kind of person who's like, I can't dance with beginners. It's painful. Especially if you're a woman, and beginner leaders are definitely much harder to dance with than beginner followers. That is kind of the reality. And that's why beginner followers can actually do well at a milonga. Beginner leaders, yeah. And granted, there was a beginner leader that pulled me out on the dance floor at Salon Canning without knowing the line of dance. And he had the audacity to do that. And it was a train wreck. And I did walk off the floor. But, that's like a very, very, that's an anomaly. Like that rarely happens, I don't think. So one thing that you can do that's not dance related is just talking to people, right? Like if you see somebody who's new, just chatting with them and saying hello and asking about them. And the second thing that's really important is introducing to people. And this is where Jana, I think I was really impressed with Jana recently. I didn't even share this with you, Jana, but a few milongas ago, not 5 minutes from when I came in, Jana came up to my table and introduced a new dancer to the whole table, including myself. And it was like, it was one of those, I just came in, I was still putting my shoes on, and she comes up, she introduces, I get up and I start talking to this woman, and then I dance with her, and then that's it. That woman was like off to the races. She was dancing with everybody. And I saw it in action, and I thought, wow, that was, I wouldn't have done that. And maybe like maybe that woman, I would have connected with her in different ways in other contexts, but like that was such a quick, efficient way of just getting someone plugged into a group, even if she hadn't danced with, even if I didn't dance with her, like just coming up and saying hello and like introducing is like already such a huge piece. So you can do that. You can definitely play a huge role in someone's experience of tango just by doing that, just by chatting with them, you know? I've danced with beginners who did Zouk for several years before. The connection is different, but similar enough that I can convey musicality and connect with them. Absolutely. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in the fusion scene, so I'm really speaking from experience here. I've danced with dancers with very little experience in dance at all. I've danced with dancers who have a lot of experience in one dance and not tango, and everything in between. And I feel like a person who is from the dance world already, like they've been dancing somehow, you can work with it. You can do stuff. You can you can make it easy. For me, a strategy, like for example, if somebody is a beginner and I want to dance with them, make sure you choose the right tanda. Like that's like an important piece. And you can say that if somebody, like if Elena tapped me on the shoulder during Pugliese and said, let's dance, I would say, you know what? Pugliese is kind of tough. Let's listen. Let me catch you on a different tanda. Let's wait for a valse, right? Like you can totally say that. And then, by the way, while we're at it, let me tell you about Cabaseo. Like it can be like that, right? We don't have to, like she made a good point. And I see this from both sides because she did tap somebody on the shoulder and that person turned around and she asked if they would dance and he looked her up and down and said, we'll see. And then didn't dance with her. That so rude. I can see it in my mind. I've seen this in action. I've experienced things like that myself. So I know how badly it can be. But she had a point. Like if you in regular life tapped somebody on the shoulder, would they treat you like that? It's like, no, it's true. Like, yeah, she tapped you on the shoulder. She didn't know any better. Just, you know, roll with the punches. It's okay. Like there's no harm done. You're not being pressured to anything. You just can say no. You can be polite about it. You can say not now. I'm actually sitting this one out. I'm actually thinking, I'm actually waiting to dance with a friend of mine, but hi, my name is so-so. Like we can totally do that. That's totally possible. Nobody is like wrestling us into something that we don't want to do. So, you know, I get that. It's like, oh my God, she touched him on the shoulder. She didn't even make eye contact first, but you know, it's okay. She's a beginner. She doesn't know. She was told wrong. Somebody gave her bad advice, right? We can be there for that. Wonder if anybody saw the video where she dances with her friend Alexander. I haven't seen it actually. If would you mind sharing that? I think I made it so that people can share links in this chat. That would be great. Because honestly, when I saw that article, I wanted to know who she was. Like I wanted to see her dance. So I looked her up on her social media. And if you look at her Instagram, like as I was looking one video, next video, I was like, hashtag not a beginner. Like this girl, she's amazing. She's got skills, like real skills. And when it comes to movement and skill set, yes, tango is very specific. It's very refined. There's a lot of subtlety, but it's also very narrow. And the skill set that somebody like her has in different dance forms and being able to plug into different rhythmical structures within Latin dance is like she's on the level of Chicho and Ariadna Navera in her own right, like in her tradition. She's a world champion. Like that's something that we have to acknowledge that. And we can't just say, well, she's like that and it's all these other dances, but tango is different. You know, like, yeah, it's different, but it's different in its social codes. It's different in its etiquette. When it comes to mechanics, when it comes to communication, when it comes to vocabulary even, it's not that original. A lot of the vocabulary exists in other dance forms, and it just looks different. It has different aesthetic. But you can't say that it's like, oh, it's just so esoteric and different from everything else. And it's the dance itself, right? The dance itself, the mechanics of the dance, it's really not like that unique in what the movements are. So it's more like the social thing and more of the etiquette that makes it super different. I think that makes it more isolating. Tango attracts more weird people and introverted social dancers than any other dance. Yes. And I want to speak to that because I want to take care of our introverted people like myself. I'm super introverted. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I need a lot of time alone. And this is why I don't talk at milongas a lot of times. It's just like, it's like my recharge. I need to like go inward. So there's a lot of people in tango who feel that way. And I think those are the people who are probably afraid the most that they're going to be asked to do more, right? And I don't think that needs to be the case. I honestly think that both can be true. Both are true. It can be the case that tango is very difficult and different and requires a lot of bells and whistles, and it's not for everyone. And you have the right as a dancer to take care of your energy first, to respect your time, to only dance with people that you want. That's there. And take that. You're empowered to do that. Nobody's going to ask you any different. But you're also not alone. And there's other people that listening to this, they'll be inspired and they'll be empowered to feel more that they have a role in the community. And those people are there too. So if you are listening to this and you're the kind of person who's like, yeah, I want to contribute. I want to learn how else I can help the community. And you have that as part of your makeup, your personality. Then just know that there's definitely things you can do. You can make a world of difference. And, you know, one person that does not get mentioned very often in this discussion from Elena's article is the leader that she danced with who actually gave her a good time. She did dance with someone and the dance was good. And that leader is not top of conversation, but they were there. And in every community, there's a sprinkling of people who are like that, who are super generous and they don't have like those sort of difficulty with connecting with new people and they do want to help. So my thinking is like, we need to cultivate more of a role for those people. And sometimes they rise to the positions of, you know, volunteers and helping the organizers, being part of the organizing team, volunteering at the front. They're the ones who are just always there smiling. They want to hug you. They'll dance with you anytime. We need more of those people, basically, is what I'm saying. We need to have a mixture, right, to offset different energy, because it doesn't work if you only have people who are like super introverted. I'm a super introverted person. I need to be around extroverted people, honestly. If I was not surrounded by extroverted people, I would never go anywhere or do anything because my natural state of being is inertia. I mean, I love dancing, but if I'm not dancing, I just want to veg. I just want to veg and chill and sit in the chair and not move. Like, that's my nature. And it's the role of the extroverts to sort of mobilize me and get me to like move. And I think that's the same thing that works within tango communities, is that you have certain people who, you know, they really don't want to socialize. They're not there for socializing. They're there to dance and they have laser focus. They're competitors. They just want to dance. They don't want to interact. Fine. There's a place there for them. Then there's people who are more outgoing and they want to connect. And those are the people that can make the difference. And it's a huge impact that they can make, right? People need to be open-minded when coming to the tango scene. Everything evolves around the human nature. I mean, people are open-minded if they're coming to tango. Like, their mind has to open at least a little bit. But there's like this demand, right? The demand of other people being open-minded. Like, do they? Do they have to be open-minded? Like, they don't know any better. They don't know what they don't know. Like, right? Like we can't honestly say like somebody just has to know it ahead of time. Like they don't know. They want to know. And granted, there is a way that they could know. My podcast, I've heard some people actually say that they met dancers, new dancers who came to tango through my podcast. They were interested in tango at some point and they looked for my podcast and they listened to the advice and they've used it and it worked. So yeah, they can like listen to my podcast. They can learn about it from YouTube, but there's still not a guarantee. There's not like a curriculum that everybody understands that you need to know before going to something like that. And it's not like on the door, right? If you're a beginner, you need to know this. And maybe that could be a good thing. Maybe there's like a little leaflet for beginners. Hey, just so you know, top 10 rules, here's what you need to expect. But that's on the community, right? To create something like that, the organizers and the people who know what to put on those rules. He took her to the most challenging milonga in NYC. At minimum, he could have introduced her to the hosts. They're usually floating around verses at the door and good about making people feel welcome. Good point. Yeah, true. He didn't do that. That's a good thing for everyone to be aware. Like as an organizer, a lot of times you want to be seen. You want to be known by beginners, especially. And sure, he could have introduced, but also the organizers could have introduced themselves too. It's their event, right? And it's kind of obvious someone like Elena, who's like not following the Capaceo rule, and it's a very stuck-up milonga. I'm sure she stood out, right? So that's also possible. I would like to see tango become more welcoming and less intimidating to newcomers. The cliquishness is a problem. As an introvert, I find myself sitting alone quite often at milongas, and I would be happy to be introduced to newcomers and help make them feel more included and welcomed and maybe share some of my experiences as a follower. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Noelle. Exactly. So useful whenever a beginner comes for them to just talk to someone and normalize their experience. Hey, it's normal to feel overwhelmed. Hey, it's okay that you got rejected, right? Like that's really, really helpful. Toshi, I teach intro to tango classes and I can say tango really takes special people. Most people just don't continue, and making it easy doesn't seem to change that. Absolutely. And I think I'd separate banter. It should be dedicated to that. Like when it's more of like teaching environment, like a class, and why certain people don't stick with tango and some do. Like, I think that's worthwhile discussion on its own. The learning curve for tango is different, right? It's different for followers. It's different for leaders. It's different from other dance forms that's there. Here, I think we're mostly talking about that milonga social environment. So I don't want to go too much into it. I wonder this, will she stick with tango long enough to be able to look back and laugh at herself and say, what on earth was I thinking? Going to that milonga after only 2 lessons, then going home and writing about it in the World Wide Web. They saw comedy as strategy plus time. I hope she comes back and sticks with it long enough to realize she can blame her naivete at least a little bit. I don't know, Stuart. I don't know. I hope she doesn't. I hope she does never blame herself for any of this. I think, if anything, I'm grateful that she wrote about this, because that was really brave, because there's tons of people who had this experience. And to say that looking back, they should just feel silly about themselves. Like, oh, I was so naive, I shouldn't have done that. Like, no, I hope she doesn't. I hope she looks back and sees this as an empowering step for herself to share her view without an agenda, without necessarily expecting to be liked or wanting acceptance, and striking up a conversation and bringing us here. Like, that's huge. That's an accomplishment. I think it's great that she's caused this conversation. She's an outsider, and she's gotten all of us tango dancers actively talking about this topic and thinking about it. And we might not all agree. The debate continues. That's fine. But like, that's something to be proud of. I'm glad that she did that instead of going home, not talking to anyone about this, and never going to tango again. Like there is a chance she's going to stick with it. Why? Because I'm going to seek her out. If I'm on the East Coast, I want to dance with her. If she comes to LA, she's invited to my practica. Like that's why she's going to dance, not because, she somehow decides to stick it out against all odds. And you need to start something entirely new, like alternative tango, if trying to be friendly and more warm. Traditional close embrace is not suitable for mixing advanced and new dancers. Good point, Jack. I think that's something, practically speaking, can be sort of understood. Like if you're dancing with a beginner, you're not going to be dancing in close embrace. Like that's not going to work. And also coming up with environments where dancers are more casual, right? So like, for example, I've been playing with this idea. I haven't seen this in action, but I feel like this could work really well. Is if at the milonga, the first hour, you just dance one song with the person, or the first half hour. And the second half hour, you dance two, and then it builds up to four after some time. So that first segment of time, or maybe it's like the first hour is a practica style. I've also seen that. I think alt is a great thing to add for beginners. So if you know that this is a milonga that attracts a lot of beginners, to provide some alt at the beginning or mixed in, that really helps. Advanced dancers who dance close embrace only, that's fine. They don't have to dance with beginners in open embrace. There's other people, like I don't care. I can dance open embrace with anyone. I prefer close embrace. That's my natural state of being in dance, but open embrace is no problem. And I think, that can be weaved into or woven into the fabric of the milonga. Like that doesn't interrupt the flow or anything like that. That's how I started. Michael's alternative was in my calendar while doing the challenge at Oxygen. Jana. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, alternative music. I'm telling you, I DJ'd my alternative set at Austin, and it was, again, just every time I'm overwhelmed by how many people love dancing alternative. And I know alternative has this like the ugly duckling reputation, like, like that awkward kid over there. Like people in tango, like serious dancers in tango are like alternative. Ugh. But alternative is legitimately a valid way of bridging the gap for people between being a complete novice and graduating to understanding tango music. When I started tango music sounded completely weird to me. I didn't understand it. It didn't sound good to me. I didn't like it. So I danced alt, a lot of alt. And eventually my ear developed, and now I'm obsessed with tango music. But I had to have that runway. And there's a lot of people like me. Not everybody's going to like tango music right away. And that's another thing we have to understand. We want everybody to have this appreciation of the music, but we typically are just expecting people to like it. We're just like, it's like, you just must understand how special this music is. But like, whoever's been convinced like that, right? You're like, you don't care for somebody, for something, and someone comes up to you and like, it's the greatest thing, you must love it. You're like, you're not going to love it. You don't like it. I think we locals have a responsibility to balance their preferences with the tango options available. Would they rather have fewer dances but access to better dancers, or something more friendly at lower level? Are they okay just to socialize and observe? A bad experience for some can taint their time in NYC. Sometimes I suggest skipping tango altogether and join the city, depending on the calendar. True, very true. I'm actually scheming an episode on this topic of like how to choose the right milonga for you. I think that's a good topic because no matter how, like I've been dancing for a long time, and there are milongas that I go to that I do not have a good time at. For whatever reason, it's just not my vibe. I don't know why. And I think that's the case for everyone, whether you're a beginner or not. Thanks for contributing so generously to this discussion. I want to finish just kind of giving my 2 cents as like some other proactive things that I've seen working or I think would be really effective in helping. And some of these have nothing to do with the dance itself, but I've noticed the organization of the space and the flow of the energy in the room has such a huge impact. One thing that she mentioned, Elena, that I clocked right away, she said, the space itself is very narrow and there's not much room to like socialize. And it's like, makes it really awkward for somebody who's new. And that plays a big role, you know? So for me, any milonga that creates spaces for people to talk off the dance floor is such a great strategy because in that space, they're not expected to dance. So if there's like a space off the dance floor where it's like obvious, you're just socializing, you're not capaceoing. When that happens, that's like where you can talk, and people who are more introverted, who don't want to necessarily speak with strangers right off the bat, it's much easier in that kind of environment because there's groups of people, you can kind of come in and move into conversations and move out, and it's a little bit more intimate in that way. So very practical, very easy thing to do for a lot of organizers. And I've seen it work really well with spaces that can afford that. The other thing that's really helped, and in our community, I think, that's my personal opinion, because I've been working on this very hard, women leading. That's been a huge support for the community because especially when it comes to new women coming into the scene, if those women are not getting the attention, they will a lot of times connect with women leaders and get dances that way. So that's a great pathway. And typically women leaders have a lower expectation or a lower bar for, you know, beginners or coming in. Like I know some men might have like a certain attachment to a certain level, perhaps, but women leaders, I think in general, we're a lot more generous with beginners because we know what it's like not to get dances, and we have that experience. And the other couple of things that I think are helpful, mixers where before the milonga starts, there's an opportunity for people to just chat. And honestly, the whole idea of ambassadors or taxi dancers, now I know I'm mixing the two, but the kind of the role that there's somebody there whose specific role is to dance with other people, whether it's monetized or not, that can be a different discussion. But like the role of those kinds of people in the community, I think can immediately change the culture, like not just over time, but like even if one milonga has 3 people who act as ambassadors or they're recognized as ambassadors, or even if they're taxi dancers, because honestly, I've seen so many dancers willing to pay for tandas when they come in. They understand. They even might say like, I understand I'm not that good and nobody's going to want to dance with me, so I'll pay someone to dance with me. So that can be a proactive way of making, you know, bridging that space between new people and tango. So those are some of my ideas I'm throwing out there, some things that I'm kind of thinking about promoting. And yeah, let's just continue to build on this momentum because we can always do more to grow the scene.